Welcome back to MVM. Today we have a preview. This one is for Paris from Game Brewer. This is a 2 to 4 player city building game with mechanics unlike I've ever seen, quite honestly.
Yeah, so Game Brewer has published a lot of games that are still in my collection. Gugong, which I consider a really strong game, and then of course Pexi Queen, which we both love.
Yeah.
So we know them for the quality of the games they have, but also the quality of the components that they have that go along with it. This is a Kramer and Kiesling game, and it is very unique, as you said. There's a lot of weird things going on. It's an economic game about city building, but there's not a lot of things that you're going to do. It's fast. You're really playing your turn out quickly and getting to the next player's turn. All right, so you are building 19th century Paris, right? And you're building the architecture into these different districts. When you look at the game board, you have the Arc de Triomphe in the center of the board. And this can be removed if you don't want to play with that, because the board itself will have all the information on it. So it kind of does hinder your ability to look over the table, so it can be removed out. There are 6 different districts in Paris. These are going to be occupied by buildings that you are placing on your turn into these areas. And you're trying to control those buildings, because those buildings are going to give you the ability to collect tokens and the ability to build your engine through the course of the game. As I said, it's a very fast-paced game, and you're not doing a whole lot of things on your turn, so you're going to get through the game pretty quickly.
Yeah, it's interesting. With those buildings, you're actually going to be, for the most part of the game, going to be seeding the board with those throughout the game. This is almost like an ongoing setup of the game, if you will, because these buildings are going to go into each of these spaces and not necessarily fill them. At a certain point, certain districts are going to have maybe more buildings than others, and this is all going to play into how you approach each district.
There's also a couple different variants that you can play with the game. We have the game set up in the most basic of modes at the start. However, you can reseed the resources through the game, and you can reseed these bonus tiles that you see that go around the table, which is going to give you a lot of variance to the game for future plays. All right, so let's talk about all the little tiny components that you see here. Each of the areas is comprised of one district, and these districts have numbers 1 through 3 on one side and then 4 through 8 on the other side. They all have names associated with them, and that's important because they tie back into the different types of buildings that you're going to be placing on them. Also, you're going to notice a number of different things that are attached to these different districts. You have resources on the 4 through 8 side, and then you have prestige on the 1 through 3 side. Again, as we said, these can be mixed and matched if you want to play with the variant. However, each of them is going to be the same. So you have prestige on the left and resources on the right. On the outside of the board, you're going to see a number of different spaces for your bonus meeple to move and collect bonus tiles. This game is all about doing actions and then trying to string further actions by getting these mostly first come, first serve bonus meeple tiles that you're able to collect and use through the game.
Yeah, and when you're trying to build out those districts with the building, you're going to need resources. And each of the districts has a different amount of money at the top of it, and you're going to be able to interact with each district in a way, and we'll explain that in a second, to get that money. And then, like Jeremy said, this outer ring is interesting because it has these bonus tiles, and they graduate all the way up into A, B, and C levels. The C has a lot of these sort of scoring and maybe end-of-game scoring tiles involved.
Okay, to set up the game, each of the players is going to have a bonus screen in front of them. This is going to hide their keys as well as the money that they have collected and any resources that they have. That's because it's important to hide those from other players, because those will kind of dictate the plans that you have during the course of the game. We have a 4-player game set up, meaning each of the players is going to have 7 keys behind their player shield. They're going to have 3 money behind there, and then 2 keys are going to be placed off to the side, which can be collected in future rounds to be able to fuel again that economy. The game is very, very simple to play. On your turn, at the start of each player's turn, they're going to look through the tops of each of these 3 building stacks. There's an equal number of these, and 3 of them will be randomly discarded at the beginning of the game, meaning that you're not always going to have the same buildings for every game. Now, we do have a prototype in front of us. In the final game, these will have names on the back of them. So you're able to look at the back side of these and see a name on it, such as Belleville. I'm allowed to select any one of these 3, look at the front side of that, and then place that in the exact area in that district. So the number 5 space in Belleville. Now you can play with the variant where you can take this tile, draft it as normal, but place it anywhere. Now there is a rule if you play with that variant that when you place it in a district, it still has to go in that number 5, but each of these also has an icon. So if there's already an icon in any of those other spaces in that district, you can't place it there. All right, so that's the first thing that happens. You place this, and it simply goes into the area. And as David already alluded to, you're building out Paris through the course of the game. Then you have an option. There's one of three different things. One of them you're simply going to take at the end of the game, and that will progress once all these buildings come out. But the most typical thing you're going to do is to place a key. Now, you don't start with any keys on the board itself. So you're going to dig behind your player shield and take one of your keys and decide which one of these districts you want to interact with, or the Arc de Triomphe. Now, why do you want to do this? If I place a key here, that means in future turns I can use that key to interact with this district and collect the number of coin that that district is worth. So immediately I would collect 3 coin and place it behind my player's shield. The other option is you could place it here, collecting no money, and that will give you some future plans as well, which I'll let David talk about.
Yeah, the other action you can take is to move a key. And like Jeremy just alluded to, you're going to want to place your key in the district, like he said, to gather resources. But if you place here in the Arc de Triomphe, you can actually have some flexibility when you move your keys. So what do you do when you move your key? Well, you're going to take a key that's already out on the board, and in the case of a district, you're just going to simply take ownership of any one of the buildings that's already there, some of which may have some costs associated with them, some may not. If you have a key in the Arc de Triomphe, you can actually take that and place it in any building anywhere in Paris.
All right, so let's talk about the importance of moving a key in a little more detail. Say, for instance, in a previous turn, I placed my key into this district, knowing that I can only have one key of my type in each of the different districts, and I collected my 3 coin. However, this turn, I don't want to place a new key. I want to move a key. I can take this key and move it to any one of the buildings that are in this area, as long as they're unoccupied by another player's key. That means they simply would own the building and I can't own it. I'm going to pay a cost for that. That cost is always the number in the bottom right-hand corner, so I pay 5 coin. I pay that to the bank, and I immediately collect that resource and put it behind my player's shield. That's important because that's going to allow me to do future things. Now, you can also move a key from one building to another building, as long as the building that you move to is a higher number. So say, for instance, I was on this one building previously, and I wanted to move that key from here to here. I would pay the difference in coin cost, being 4. I would go directly to that location and then collect the resource. Now, there's several different actions that David kind of alluded to that can happen when you place your key for the first time. The 4s and 5 spaces don't have anything on the tile, so none of the 4s and 5s are going to give you anything special except those resources that they're attached to. However, the 1s and the 2s are going to have a special action on them in the upper left-hand corner. That allows you to move your bonus meeple as far as you want around this track. So this is a really cool portion of the game. When you take your bonus meeple, you can place them anywhere, taking any one of the actions that you land on and taking that tile. Just note that the next time you move your bonus meeple, it can never go backwards. So you could go all the way to the end if you want and get that juicy tile, but you've skipped everything else out there. That's going to happen for the 1 and 2 tiles, and the 3 tiles are going to allow you to do the same thing, but at a cost of 2 coin.
Yeah, and the 8 tile, which is the last tile, is actually going to be very simple. You're going to collect 2 victory points when you place this or place your key on it. Also note, it's going to carry an extra cost, so you have to pay this additional cost in addition to the coin that you have to pay.
Now, it's very important to note too that I mentioned that you can only move a key from that district into the same district. Now, what happens if someone lays a tile over here, but I don't have a key present? That's why this is so important. Going to this Arc de Triomphe does not give you any coin when you go there, but it does give you the flexibility of moving your key from that location to any one of the districts. So if someone plays a tile that they're not able to interact with on that same turn, guess what? You can go interact it and snake it from that player.
Yeah, you might want to put a key there for a rainy day, so to speak, because if you have one there early, it gives you that flexibility throughout the rest of the game for that exact moment.
Now, there are some other types of buildings that you can do. Off to the screen, which you can't see right now, there are 8 of these landmark tiles that can be built into districts. All of these tiles work functionally different than your normal building tiles. In the upper right, they all have costs associated with them, all being resources of one of the 3 different types that you have to get rid of. Also, when you build these locations, they're going to have a cost as well in the lower right. Again, that's a monetary cost that you have to pay. Finally, on the left-hand side, they're going to have prestige markers that you can give up in order to gain resources if you have them the moment that you build them. Let's talk about that in a little more detail. Say, for instance, I want to build this tile here. I already have presence in this area. I could pick any one of the 8 tiles off to the side, pay the difference in cost, pay the resource associated with it, move there, being 8 coins, and then trade in some bronze prestige that I previously collected for victory points.
Yeah, the landmarks are kind of interesting because like Jeremy just said, you're going to want to pace yourself, collect enough prestige before you build that landmark so that you can actually cash in as much of it as possible. One other thing to note about the landmarks is you can build as many in any one location as you want. It just has to be a higher value landmark. So if you have a 9 placed, you have to have at least a 10 after that. And if you're on the 9, you can even be the one who builds that 10 and just move that key up there if you'd like, paying the difference.
Now, why do you want to place your keys into these areas? Well, it's important because once the 4th key is added to any one of these districts, being yours or other players or a combination of them both, the player that places that 4th key is going to take one of these victory point tiles and place it into that district. There's 6 of these tiles. It's first come, first serve, and they're going to give the players that are in that area victory points at the end of the game for whoever has the most presence there. And by what I mean by presence is you're going to add up all the values of the buildings that you control. Whoever has the most wins. So if you have more keys, it doesn't matter. You just have to have a higher number.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It injects an element into the game where someone could have a lot of presence with a number of keys on the 1, the 2, and the 3, but they only have 6 points of presence there. I could come in with one 9-point building and beat them with just 1 key.
Now, there's some other things that you can do as free actions on your turn. If you turn this around and you look at this player shield, at any time on your turn, you can sell your prestige and any of your resources for gold. Again, that's going to help you fuel your economy. Any of the resources that are sold are going to go into a common pool because those can be bought back from other players during their turn. However, prestige is removed from the game. So, as you can kind of deduce, there's not going to be any resources to buy at the beginning of the game. Players are going to have to collect those from the board, use them to go into a pool, or to sell them out. One other thing that you need to know about the game is that you're going to keep doing this round after round, placing a building, which is mandatory, and then taking one of those actions until all of the buildings are gone. This is going to pseudo-trigger the end of the game because you can keep playing infinitely until you go through this stack of endgame tiles. So instead of placing a key or moving a key, you can decide to look through this giant stack of 12 tiles and decide to take one of them of your choice. As soon as this stack is gone, then you're going to trigger the actual end game itself.
Yeah, and once you've triggered the end game, you're going to finish that round so every player has equal number of turns. And then on top of that, take one more full round for every player.
All right, so we've already mentioned a lot of the elements of the game. The biggest thing about this game is this bonus track that you're going to be moving around. As we alluded to, the 1s, the 2s, and the 3s give you the opportunity of taking your bonus meeple and moving to any one of these locations. All of these bonus tiles are first come, first serve, and they all break the rules typically of the game. They allow you to do things like placing keys onto locations with other players, even locations where you have your own key, because typically once a key is on a building, it's theirs and theirs only. There's a lot of them are going to give you resources or maybe even victory points at the end of the game as well. So manipulating your guys around the board and getting these bonus things are extremely important.
Yeah, and the pacing there can be very tricky because you may want to, like Jeremy said earlier, go all the way around and grab that one tile, but then you're going to be missing out on a lot of other tiles. On the other hand, if you chug along this track too slowly, you're not, by the end of the game, going to be able to get around here to get all of these end-of-game victory tiles.
And remember, there's a lot of variants that you can play with. Once you've played this base game once, you can intermix all the way that the resources and the prestige come out. You can even intermix your A sections, your B section, and your C section of your bonus tiles, so they're not always out in the same location each time you play. You can even play with that variant where you don't play with the buildings going to the exact locations. You can draft them and then choose where they go. So again, they're going to have a lot of variance in the way that you can play the game.
Yeah, like we said at the very beginning, this is a very unique game. It's got a lot of different things going on that you may be familiar with, but you certainly have not seen it in this combination.
Very cool publisher. We love Game Brewer and everything they do. And of course, Kramer and Kiesling, always a design group that is to be looked at. It is a 2 to 4 player game, plays in about 90 minutes. If you have any questions about the game, make them in the comments below. Subscribe to us, follow us on Twitter, make sure you check out their Kickstarter page, and we'll see you guys next time.
Bye-bye.